The engineering bay of the ISS Equilibrium hummed with the steady thrum of hyperspace engines, a sound that had become as familiar to Arthur as his own heartbeat during his first 6 months aboard the massive interstellar vessel. The ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, housing over 3,000 beings from 17 different species, all working together in what the Galactic Council proudly called the greatest achievement in interspecies cooperation since the Treaty of Proxima. Arthur wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a slight smear on his pale human skin as he bent over the quantum flux regulator. The device had been acting up for the better part of the week, causing minor fluctuations in the ship's artificial gravity field. Nothing dangerous, but enough to make the Bordeaux crew members slightly queasy, and when Bordeaux's got queasy, their naturally crimson skin turned an alarming shade of purple that made everyone else nervous. "Pass me the quantum spanner," Arthur called to his assistant Hash, who was busy organizing tools in the nearby storage cabinet. Hash was a typical Bordeaux, standing about 5.5 feet tall, with the characteristic red skin that gave his species its nickname among humans, the Reds. His 4 arms made him incredibly efficient at multitasking, though Arthur had learned that Hash's tendency toward dramatic reactions could turn even minor situations into major productions. Hash's large, dark eyes focused on Arthur as he reached for the requested tool. "You know, Arthur," he said in his melodic Bordeaux accent, "I still cannot believe the Council approved a human for this position. No offense, but your species has such a short history with interstellar technology." Arthur chuckled, accepting the spanner with a practiced ease. "None taken, Hash. We're the new kids on the block, I'll give you that. But sometimes, fresh eyes can spot problems that experience might overlook." "Perhaps," Hash replied, though his tone suggested he remained unconvinced. "Just be careful with that regulator. The quantum matrix is extremely sensitive, and if you damage it—" I know," Arthur interrupted good-naturedly. "We'll be stuck in normal space for 3 weeks while we wait for replacement parts. You've only told me that 47 times. Arthur positioned himself beneath the regulator housing and began working on the problematic connection. The quantum spanner fit perfectly into the specialized coupling, and he began the delicate process of realigning the flux vectors. The work required precision and patience, 2 qualities that Arthur prided himself on possessing in abundance. The engineering bay around them was a marvel of interspecies design. Workstations had been configured to accommodate beings of various heights and limb configurations. The Bordeaux stations featured multiple manipulator arms, while the tall, ethereal Zanari had platforms that extended nearly 3 meters high. Human workstations, still relatively new additions to the ship's design, were positioned at standard human height, with tools specifically calibrated for 2-armed operation. As Arthur worked, he found himself thinking about the remarkable journey that had brought him here. 5 years ago, humanity had barely achieved reliable faster-than-light travel. Now, he was the first human engineer aboard one of the galaxy's most advanced exploration vessels, tasked with maintaining technology that his species was only beginning to understand. The quantum flux regulator required a series of careful adjustments, each one building upon the previous correction. Arthur had spent weeks studying the technical manuals, cross-referencing human engineering principles with Bordeaux quantum mechanics and Zanari energy field theory. The result was a hybrid understanding that sometimes produced innovative solutions to complex problems. "Arthur," Hash called from across the bay, "the flux readings are looking much better. Whatever you're doing, it's working." "Good to hear," Arthur replied, applying a bit more pressure to the spanner. The coupling was being stubborn, refusing to align properly, despite his best efforts. He gritted his teeth and gave it one more firm twist. The coupling suddenly gave way, and Arthur's hand slipped, sending the spanner flying across the bay. The sharp edge of the tool caught his nose, slicing a shallow cut across the bridge. Arthur cursed under his breath more from surprise than pain, and brought his hand up to his face. When he pulled his hand away, he saw what looked like drops of orange fluid on his fingers. Human blood, when oxygenated, appeared bright red to human eyes, but under the specific lighting conditions of the Bordeaux-designed engineering bay, it took on a distinctly orange hue. "Ouch!" Arthur muttered, reaching for a maintenance cloth to clean up the minor cut. "Hash, could you grab me the first aid kit? I managed to give myself a small cut." Hash turned toward Arthur, and his large dark eyes immediately locked onto the orange fluid on Arthur's hand. The Bordeaux's expression changed from mild concern to absolute terror in the span of a single heartbeat. "Arthur!" Hash shrieked, his voice rising to a pitch that Arthur hadn't known the Bordeaux vocal cords could achieve. "You're bleeding orange. Orange blood means you're dying. Critical organ failure. Immediate medical intervention required." Arthur blinked in confusion, still holding the cloth to his nose. "Hash, calm down. It's just a small cut. I'm fine." But Hash was already in full panic mode. In Bordeaux culture, the color of blood was a critical diagnostic indicator. Red blood meant normal function, dark. Red indicated minor stress, and orange blood was a sign of imminent system failure, requiring immediate emergency intervention. The fact that human blood appeared orange under their lighting system was a detail that had somehow been overlooked in the integration manuals. "Emergency, emergency." Hash began shouting, his forearms flailing in the universal Bordeaux distress signal. "Human medical crisis, orange blood detected, code red, medical emergency." "Hash, please," Arthur tried to interrupt. "It's really not that serious. Humans bleed red normally. It just looks orange under your lights." But Hash wasn't listening. In his panic, he lunged toward Arthur, apparently intending to physically restrain him to prevent him from collapsing from organ failure. Arthur, startled by the sudden attack, stepped backward and raised his hands defensively. The two of them collided in a tangle of limbs, with Hash's forearms trying to grab Arthur, while Arthur attempted to fend off what he perceived as an unprovoked assault. Their struggle sent them careening across the engineering bay, knocking over tool carts and diagnostic equipment. "Hash, stop, I'm trying to tell you. Must restrain patient, prevent further injury. Medical emergency protocols." Their wrestling match carried them directly into the central control panel, where Hash's flailing upper left arm struck the large red emergency medical alert button. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the engineering section, and automated announcements began broadcasting on all ship frequencies. "Medical emergency in Engineering Bay 7. All medical personnel respond immediately. Code red, medical emergency in Engineering Bay 7. Arthur managed to disentangle himself from Hash's grasp and stood up, brushing dust off his uniform. "Hash, you need to calm down and listen to me. This is all a misunderstanding." But the damage was already done. The ship's automated medical response system had been activated, and the heavy blast doors to the engineering bay began to seal as part of the contamination protocols. Within 30 seconds, the bay was completely isolated from the rest of the ship. "Now, look what you've done," Arthur said, gesturing at the sealed doors. "We're locked in here until the medical team arrives." Hash stared at Arthur with a mixture of fear and confusion. "But Arthur, you have orange blood. In Bordeaux physiology, orange blood indicates critical organ failure. You should be unconscious by now. How are you still standing?" Arthur sighed and sat down on a nearby equipment crate. "Hash, I keep trying to tell you. Human blood isn't the same as Bordeaux blood. We have different biochemistry. What looks orange to you is perfectly normal for humans. But the medical databases clearly state that orange blood are based on Bordeaux physiology," Arthur finished. "Human blood contains iron-based hemoglobin, which carries oxygen and gives our blood its red color. Under normal Earth lighting, it appears bright red. Under your lighting system, it looks orange. It's an optical effect, not a medical emergency." Hash's eyes widened as he began to process this information. "You mean you're not dying?" "I'm not dying. I have a small cut on my nose from a tool accident. In human medical terms, this would be classified as a minor injury requiring basic first aid." Before Hash could respond, the sealed blast doors began to cycle open with a hydraulic hiss. The ship's emergency medical team came pouring into the engineering bay, led by Dr. Venth, the chief medical officer. Dr. Venth was a Bordeaux with over 30 years of experience in interspecies medicine, though his specialty was primarily focused on Bordeaux Zanari and Krillian physiology. "Where's the patient?" Dr. Venth called out, his medical scanner already active and sweeping the bay for life signs. Hash pointed at Arthur with two of his arms. "There, Arthur. He has orange blood. Critical organ failure." Dr. Venth's scanner locked onto Arthur and immediately began displaying readings that meant nothing to Arthur, but caused the medical team to spring into action with impressive efficiency. Before Arthur could protest, he found himself surrounded by 6 Bordeaux medical technicians, each one armed with various scanning devices and emergency medical equipment. "Patient shows signs of severe physiological distress," one of the technicians announced. "Blood chemistry indicates critical system failure." "Wait," Arthur tried to interject. "I can explain." "Patient appears to be experiencing delirium," another technician reported. "Recommend immediate sedation and emergency life support." "I'm not delirious," Arthur protested, but his words were lost in the chaos of medical equipment being deployed around him. A portable emergency medical bed was wheeled into the bay, complete with automated restraint systems and life support monitoring. Arthur found himself being gently but firmly guided toward the bed by multiple sets of Bordeaux hands. "Please, just listen to me for a moment," Arthur pleaded. "This is all a misunderstanding. Human blood is supposed to look like this." Dr. Venth looked up from his medical scanner with a grave expression. "Arthur, I understand that you're frightened, but you need to trust us. Your blood chemistry readings are completely outside normal parameters. We need to get you to the medical bay immediately." "My blood chemistry is normal for a human," Arthur insisted, but he was already being positioned on the emergency medical bed. The automated restraint systems activated, securing Arthur to the bed with soft but unbreakable restraints. Various monitoring devices were attached to his arms, chest, and head, each one feeding data to the central medical scanner. "All readings confirm critical organ failure," one of the technicians reported. "Recommend immediate intervention." Arthur watched in growing alarm as the medical team prepared what appeared to be a large syringe filled with bright blue fluid. "What is that?" "Emergency stabilization compound," Dr. Venth explained. "It will help maintain your vital functions until we can perform corrective surgery." "Corrective surgery for what?" "To repair whatever is causing your blood chemistry to be so completely wrong." Arthur struggled against the restraints, his voice rising in desperation. "There's nothing wrong with my blood chemistry. You're all operating on completely incorrect assumptions about human physiology." But the medical team was trained to expect denial and confusion from patients experiencing severe medical trauma. Arthur's protests were interpreted as symptoms of his condition, rather than accurate information about his species' biology. The emergency medical bed was wheeled out of the engineering bay at high speed, with Arthur still strapped down and protesting loudly. As they moved through the ship's corridors, other crew members stopped to watch the procession with concerned expressions. Word spread quickly through the ship's communication networks. The first human crew member was experiencing a severe medical emergency. Captain Thrace, a distinguished Zanari with over 40 years of command experience, was immediately notified and began making preparations for potential emergency procedures. The medical bay of the ISS Equilibrium was a marvel of interspecies. Medical technology equipped to handle the physiological needs of all 17 species represented in the crew. However, the human medical protocols were still relatively new and hadn't been fully integrated with the ship's automated diagnostic systems. Arthur was transferred to the primary medical suite, where even more sophisticated scanning equipment began analyzing his vital signs. To the Bordeaux medical staff, every reading confirmed their worst fears. Arthur's blood chemistry was completely abnormal. His neural activity patterns were erratic, and his cardiovascular system was functioning in ways that their database indicated were impossible for a living being. Dr. Venth One of the medical technicians called out, "The patient's readings are getting worse. Recommend immediate life support intervention." Arthur craned his neck to see the displays, which showed various graphs and numerical readouts that meant nothing to him. What do those readings actually say? Your blood oxygen levels are at critical lows, your neural chemistry is completely imbalanced, and your cardiovascular function is erratic, Dr. Venth replied grimly. Those readings are probably normal for humans, Arthur insisted. You're comparing me to bordeaux-physiology. Dr. Venth paused for a moment, considering Arthur's words. Arthur, I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. I've treated members of 16 different species. I know what normal vital signs look like. But you've never treated a human before, Arthur pointed out. I'm the first human on this ship, remember? The words seemed to give Dr. Venth pause, but before he could respond, one of the monitoring devices began emitting a high-pitched alarm. The display showed Arthur's heart rate, spiking dramatically. Patient is going into cardiac distress, the technician announced. Arthur's heart rate was indeed elevated, but only because he was strapped to a medical bed while an entire medical team discussed his imminent death based on completely incorrect assumptions about his physiology. The stress of the situation was causing a perfectly normal human stress response, which the Bordeaux medical equipment was interpreting as a sign of system failure. We're losing him, Dr. Venth announced. Prepare emergency cardiac intervention. You're not losing me, Arthur shouted. I'm stressed because you're all convinced I'm dying when I'm perfectly fine. But his protests were drowned out by the sound of medical equipment being prepared. Arthur watched in horror as the medical team began setting up what appeared to be some kind of cardiac defibrillation device. Wait, Arthur called out desperately. Just call up the human medical database, check the normal ranges for human physiology. Dr. Venth paused with his hand on the defibrillation controls. The human medical database. Yes, there has to be one somewhere on this ship. Check my normal vital signs against human parameters, not Bordeaux ones. For a moment, the medical bay fell silent, except for the beeping of monitoring equipment. Dr. Venth looked around at his team, then back at Arthur. Medical computer. Dr. Venth called out, display normal physiological parameters for human beings. Accessing human medical database, the computer replied in its calm, automated voice. Warning, human medical database is incomplete. Recommend consulting with human medical specialist for accurate diagnosis. Display what you have, Dr. Venth ordered. A holographic display appeared above Arthur's medical bed, showing the basic physiological parameters for human beings. The data was indeed incomplete, but what was there immediately showed that Arthur's vital signs were well within normal human ranges. Dr. Venth stared at the display, then at his medical scanner, then back at the display. This indicates that your readings are normal for a human. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Arthur exclaimed. Everything about my physiology is completely normal for my species. The medical team stood in stunned silence as they realized the magnitude of their error. Dr. Venth slowly powered down the defibrillation device and set it aside. We nearly performed emergency cardiac surgery on a healthy patient, he said quietly. A very stressed but otherwise healthy patient, Arthur corrected. Can you please release these restraints now? But before Dr. Venth could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the medical bay. The ship's automated systems, having detected what they interpreted as a medical emergency, had initiated the next phase of emergency protocols. All crew members report to designated emergency stations, the ship's computer announced. Medical emergency in progress. Prepare for potential quarantine procedures. Arthur groaned. Hash's panic button probably triggered the full emergency cascade. How long does it take to shut that down? Dr. Venth was consulting his medical scanner, which was still displaying readings that looked alarming to anyone not familiar with human physiology. Arthur, while your vital signs appear to be normal for a human, my equipment is still showing readings that are extremely concerning. That's because your equipment is calibrated for Bordeaux physiology, Arthur explained patiently. Human blood pressure, heart rate, and brain activity are all different from Bordeaux norms. What looks like a medical emergency to your scanner is just a normal Tuesday for me. Medical computer. Dr. Venth called out again. What is the procedure for canceling emergency medical protocols? Emergency medical protocols can only be canceled by the Chief Medical Officer after confirmation that the emergency has been resolved. The computer replied, I'm the Chief Medical Officer and I'm confirming that the emergency has been resolved. Negative. Protocols require confirmation that the patient is stable and not in immediate danger of system failure. Dr. Venth looked at Arthur with a worried expression. The computer won't accept my confirmation because your readings still appear abnormal to our sensors. Arthur sighed deeply. So we're stuck in medical emergency mode until you can convince the computer that I'm not dying. It appears so. The implications of this situation began to dawn on Arthur. The ship's emergency protocols were designed to prioritize the safety of the crew above all other considerations. If the computer believed that Arthur was in critical condition, it would continue escalating emergency procedures until either the crisis was resolved or other measures were taken. Dr. Venth, Arthur said carefully, what happens if the computer decides that my condition is terminal? Dr. Venth hesitated before answering. The ship's protocols require that in cases of terminal illness, with no possibility of recovery, the patient be prepared for final medical procedures. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. Final medical procedures. Palliative care, pain management, and preparation for memorial services. Memorial services. Arthur's voice cracked slightly. You mean the computer might decide I'm dead? Not dead exactly, but no longer viable for continued life support. Arthur stared at the ceiling of the medical bay processing this information. The ship's computer was sophisticated enough to run complex medical protocols, but apparently not sophisticated enough to recognize that its diagnostic criteria didn't apply to human physiology. If his vital signs continued to appear abnormal, the computer might decide that he was beyond medical help and begin preparing for his death. How long do we have before the computer makes that determination? Arthur asked. Dr. Venth consulted his scanner. Based on current readings and the progression of what the computer interprets as system failure, approximately 6 hours. 6 hours to convince a computer that I'm not dying when all of its sensors say that I am. Essentially, yes. Arthur closed his eyes and tried to think. There had to be a way to resolve this situation. The ship's computer was logical and rule-based. If he could find the right approach, he should be able to convince it that his condition was normal. Dr. Venth, do you have access to the complete technical specifications for the ship's medical sensors? Of course, why? Because I think the problem is in the sensor calibration. If we can recalibrate the sensors to account for human physiology, the computer should recognize that my vital signs are normal. Dr. Venth's eyes lit up with understanding. That's actually a very logical approach, but recalibrating the medical sensors would require authorization from the chief engineer. Arthur smiled for the first time since this whole mess began. I am the chief engineer's assistant. I have emergency authorization to make critical system modifications. But you're currently classified as a medical patient in critical condition. The computer won't accept authorization from someone it considers to be incapacitated. Arthur's smile faded. So we're back to square one. Not necessarily, Dr. Venth said thoughtfully. There might be another approach. If we can download the complete human medical database from the Galactic Medical Council, we might be able to update the ship's diagnostic criteria. How long would that take? In normal circumstances, about an hour. But the ship is currently in emergency mode, which restricts non-essential communications. Arthur was beginning to understand why Hash had been so insistent about reading technical manuals. Complex systems like starships had layers upon layers of interconnected protocols, and changing one system often had unexpected effects on others. What about manual override? Arthur suggested. There has to be some way to manually shut down the emergency protocols. Manual override requires authorization from the captain, Dr. Venth explained. But Captain Thrace is currently dealing with the ship-wide emergency alert that your medical situation triggered. As if summoned by their conversation, the medical bay doors opened, and Captain Thrace entered, accompanied by 2 security officers and Hash. The Zanari captain was nearly 7 feet tall with the characteristic translucent skin and ethereal grace of his species. His expression was grave as he approached Arthur's medical bed. "Arthur," Captain Thrace said in his melodious voice, "I've been informed that you're experiencing a severe medical emergency." "Captain, I'm perfectly fine," Arthur replied. "This is all a misunderstanding based on the ship's medical sensors being calibrated for bordo-physiology instead of human physiology." Captain Thrace looked at Dr. Venth for confirmation. "Doctor, what is Arthur's current condition?" Dr. Venth hesitated. "Physically, Arthur appears to be in normal health for a human. However, our medical sensors continue to indicate critical system failure." "Because the sensors are wrong," Arthur interjected. "They're measuring my vital signs against Bordeaux standards. It's like using a thermometer calibrated for water temperature to measure the temperature of liquid nitrogen. You'll get a reading, but it won't mean what you think it means." Hash stepped forward, wringing his 4 hands nervously. "Captain, I was the one who activated the emergency alert. Arthur was bleeding orange, which in Bordeaux physiology indicates critical organ failure. I thought he was dying." Captain Thrace studied the holographic display showing Arthur's vital signs. To his Zanari eyes accustomed to reading medical data for multiple species, the readings were clearly abnormal by any standards he was familiar with. "Arthur," the captain said carefully, "I understand your position, but from a command perspective, I cannot ignore the medical team's assessment. If there's even a possibility that you're in danger—" "Captain, look at me," Arthur said, sitting up as much as the restraints would allow. "Do I look like someone who's dying? I'm alert, coherent, and my only injury is a small cut on my nose that stopped bleeding 20 minutes ago." Captain Thrace had to admit that Arthur did appear to be in remarkably good health for someone supposedly experiencing critical organ failure. "Dr. Venth, is it possible that our medical sensors are providing incorrect readings?" "It's theoretically possible," Dr. Venth admitted. "Human physiology is significantly different from the species our sensors were designed to monitor." "Then let's resolve this scientifically," Captain Thrace decided. Dr. Venth began immediate recalibration of the medical sensors using human physiological parameters. Hash, you will assist by providing detailed specifications for the engineering systems that might be affected by the sensor recalibration. "Captain," Arthur said, "there's one problem with that plan. The ship's computer won't allow system modifications, while I'm classified as a critical medical patient." Captain Thrace frowned. "Explain." "The emergency protocols prevent any system changes that might affect life support or medical equipment while there's an active medical emergency. The computer thinks I'm dying, so it won't let anyone modify the systems that are supposedly keeping me alive. Even with Captain's override authorization, emergency medical protocols supersede normal command authority," Dr. Venth confirmed. "It's a safety feature designed to prevent interference with life-saving procedures." Captain Thrace was silent for a long moment, considering the logical paradox they faced. The computer wouldn't accept that Arthur was healthy because the sensors said he was dying. But they couldn't fix the sensors because the computer thought Arthur was dying and wouldn't allow system modifications. "There's one other option," Captain Thrace said finally. "We can manually shut down the ship's medical computer and restart it with updated parameters." "How long would that take?" Arthur asked. "Approximately 4 hours for complete shutdown and restart." Arthur glanced at the chronometer display. "That might not be fast enough. Dr. Venth said the computer will declare me terminal in about 6 hours, but that was 30 minutes ago." "What happens if the computer declares you terminal before we can restart it?" Captain Thrace asked. Dr. Venth shifted uncomfortably. "The ship's protocols require that terminal patients be prepared for memorial procedures." "Memorial procedures?" "The computer will assume that Arthur has died and will begin preparing his body for the funeral rituals appropriate to his species." Arthur felt his heart rate spike again, which immediately caused alarms to sound on his medical monitors. It's going to kill me because it thinks I'm already dead. Not exactly, Dr. Venth explained. The computer will assume you've died and will begin preserving your body for memorial services. The preservation process involves sedation and metabolic suspension, which would actually kill me. Well, yes. Captain Thrace stared at the displays showing Arthur's vital signs. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. The ship's medical systems designed to save lives were prepared to end Arthur's life, based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human physiology. Begin immediate shutdown of the medical computer, Captain Thrace ordered. Authorization Thrace Alpha 77. Negative, the ship's computer replied. Medical computer shutdown requires confirmation that all patients are stable and not requiring life support. Patient Arthur is stable and does not require life support. Negative. Current readings indicate patient Arthur is experiencing critical system failure and requires continued monitoring. Captain Thrace closed his eyes in frustration. The computer was trapped in a logical loop, unable to accept that Arthur was healthy, because its sensors insisted he was dying, and unable to modify those sensors because it believed Arthur needed constant medical monitoring. Captain, Hash spoke up hesitantly. What if we could prove to the computer that Arthur's readings are normal for his species? How do you propose we do that? The ship's database contains detailed physiological information for all crew members. If we could access Arthur's pre-mission medical records and compare them to his current readings, the computer might recognize that his condition is stable. Arthur's eyes widened with hope. Hash, that's brilliant. My medical records from Earth should show exactly the same vital signs I'm displaying now. Captain Thrace nodded approvingly. Dr. Venth, access Arthur's personnel medical records immediately. Dr. Venth activated his medical scanner and began accessing the ship's personnel database. Accessing medical records for Arthur, first human crew member. Accessing. The scanner beeped softly. Medical records found, displaying baseline physiological parameters. A new holographic display appeared above Arthur's bed, showing his pre-mission medical examination results. The readings were virtually identical to his current vital signs. Computer, Captain Thrace called out, compare current patient readings to baseline medical records for patient Arthur. Comparing current readings to baseline. Comparison complete. Current readings are within normal parameters for patient Arthur, based on baseline medical records. Arthur felt a wave of relief wash over him. So you can confirm that I'm healthy? Affirmative. Patient Arthur's current readings are consistent with normal health parameters for his species. Then cancel the medical emergency and release the restraints. Negative. Current readings continue to indicate critical system failure based on established medical criteria for shipboard personnel. Arthur groaned in frustration. The computer could recognize that his vital signs were normal for him personally, but it couldn't override its general medical protocols that were based on non-human physiology. We need to update the ship's general medical criteria to include human parameters, Dr. Venth realized. The computer can see that Arthur's readings are normal for Arthur, but it can't accept that those readings are normal for humans in general. How do we update the medical criteria? Captain Thrace asked. We need authorization from the Galactic Medical Council to modify the ship's core medical protocols. Arthur stared at the ceiling in despair. How long does it take to get authorization from the Galactic Medical Council? Under normal circumstances, 3 to 4 days. I'll be dead in 5 hours. Captain Thrace began pacing the length of the medical bay, his tall frame moving with the fluid grace characteristic of Zanari. There has to be another solution. Hash, you're Arthur's assistant. Do you have any other ideas? Hash had been standing quietly near the door, his forearms fidgeting nervously. Well, there is one possibility, but it's somewhat irregular. At this point, irregular might be our only option, Arthur said. The ship's computer has learning protocols designed to update its knowledge base when presented with new information. If we could provide it with sufficient data about human physiology, it might be able to revise its medical criteria automatically. Dr. Venth looked intrigued. What kind of data would be required? Comprehensive physiological readings from multiple humans under various conditions. The computer would need to see that Arthur's readings are representative of normal human physiology, not just normal for Arthur specifically. But Arthur is the only human on the ship, Captain Thrace pointed out. Actually, Hash said thoughtfully, that might not be entirely accurate. The ship's database contains detailed physiological simulations for all known species. If we could access the human simulation protocols, Arthur's heart rate began to increase with excitement, which immediately triggered alarms on his medical monitors. Hash, you magnificent four-armed genius. The ship's environmental systems have to maintain life support for humans, which means they have detailed models of human physiology built into their programming. Dr. Venth activated his scanner and began accessing the ship's environmental control database. Accessing life support protocols. Accessing human environmental requirements. Found. The system contains comprehensive physiological models for human life support. Computer. Captain Thrace commanded access human physiological models from environmental control systems. Accessing environmental control database. Human physiological models located. Compare current patient readings to normal parameters from human physiological models. Comparing. Comparison complete. Patient Arthur's readings are within normal parameters for human physiology based on environmental control models. Then, confirm that patient Arthur is not experiencing a medical emergency. Affirmative. Patient Arthur's readings are consistent with normal human physiology. No medical emergency detected. Arthur felt the restraints on his arms and legs retract with a soft mechanical whir. He sat up slowly, stretching muscles that had been immobilized for over an hour. Emergency medical protocols are now canceled, the computer announced. Medical bay returning to normal operating status. Arthur swung his legs over the side of the medical bed and stood up carefully. His legs were slightly shaky from the stress and immobilization, but otherwise he felt perfectly fine. Well, he said to the assembled group, that was educational. Dr. Venth powered down his medical scanner and shook his head in amazement. Arthur, I owe you an apology. We nearly performed unnecessary emergency surgery based on incomplete information. No harm done, Doctor. Well, no permanent harm anyway. But this whole situation does highlight an important issue. Captain Thrace nodded gravely. The ship's medical systems need to be updated to properly account for human physiology before we encounter any real human medical emergencies. That's certainly true, Arthur agreed. But there's also a more immediate lesson here. He turned to look at Hash, who was still fidgeting nervously by the door. Hash, what did you do wrong in this situation? Hash's large dark eyes widened. I panicked when I saw orange blood instead of checking the technical specifications for human physiology. Exactly. And what should you have done instead? Read the manual. Arthur smiled broadly. Read the manual. If you had consulted the human physiology guide before hitting the panic button, we could have avoided this entire mess. But Arthur, Hash protested, human physiology guides are over 300 pages long. Who has time to read all of that during an emergency? You don't read it during the emergency, Hash. You read it before the emergency happens. That's the whole point of technical manuals. They're supposed to be studied in advance so you know what to do when unusual situations arise. Dr. Venth nodded in agreement. Arthur makes an excellent point. As the ship's chief medical officer, I should have thoroughly familiarized myself with human medical parameters before we began this mission. We all should have, Captain Thrace added. The integration of a new species into a multi-species crew requires preparation and understanding from everyone involved. Arthur walked over to Hash and placed a reassuring hand on one of his four shoulders. Hash, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. You reacted the way anyone would when faced with what appeared to be a medical emergency. But this is exactly why technical documentation exists, to prevent misunderstandings like this. I understand, Hash replied, his voice subdued. From now on, I will read all relevant manuals before working with new equipment or new species. That's all any of us can do, Arthur said. Learn from our mistakes and try to be better prepared next time. Captain Thrace activated his communication device. All crew members, this is the captain. The medical emergency has been resolved. Arthur is in perfect health. The situation was caused by a misunderstanding regarding human physiology. Please return to normal duties. As the group began to leave the medical bay, Arthur noticed that Hash was still looking troubled. Hash, what's wrong? You look like you're still worried about something. Hash fidgeted with his four hands. Arthur, I'm concerned about future situations. What if there are other human physiological characteristics that we don't understand? What if we encounter another emergency, and I don't know how to respond appropriately? Arthur considered this question seriously. That's a valid concern, Hash. But the solution isn't to worry about every possible scenario. The solution is to educate yourself systematically. How do you mean? Well, you could start by reading the Human Crew Integration Manual. I'm sure there's one somewhere in the ship's database. Then, you could review the Human Medical Reference Guide, the Human Emergency Procedures Handbook, and any other documentation related to human physiology and behavior. Hash's eyes lit up with understanding. A comprehensive educational program. Exactly. And not just for you. The entire crew should probably undergo some basic training in human physiology and cultural practices. We're going to be working together for the next 3 years, so we might as well understand each other properly. Dr. Venth nodded enthusiastically. I could develop a medical cross-training program that covers the basic physiological parameters for all species represented in our crew. It would help prevent this type of misunderstanding in the future. That's an excellent idea, Doctor, Captain Thrace said. Please prepare a comprehensive cross-species medical training curriculum. We'll implement it as soon as possible. As they walked through the corridors back toward the engineering section, Arthur reflected on the events of the day. What had started as a simple tool accident had escalated into a ship-wide emergency, all because of a fundamental misunderstanding about human biology. The corridors of the ISS Equilibrium were bustling with activity as crew members returned to their normal duties after the emergency alert. Arthur noticed that many of them were staring at him with expressions of curiosity and relief. Word had apparently spread throughout the ship that the first human crew member had nearly died on his first day. Arthur, Hash said as they walked, I have a question about human physiology. Sure, what would you like to know? Why does human blood appear orange under our lighting systems? I understand that it's actually red, but I don't understand the optical mechanics involved. Arthur smiled. This was exactly the kind of question that should have been asked hours ago. It has to do with the wavelength of light that your lighting systems produce. Human blood contains iron-based hemoglobin, which reflects certain wavelengths of light more than others. Under Earth normal lighting, which is similar to our sun's spectrum, blood appears red because it reflects red wavelengths efficiently. But our lighting systems use a different spectrum. Right. Bordeaux lighting systems are optimized for Bordeaux vision, which is sensitive to slightly different wavelengths than human vision. Under your lighting, the iron in human blood reflects wavelengths that appear orange to both human and Bordeaux eyes. Hash nodded thoughtfully. So the same substance can appear to be different colors, depending on the lighting conditions. Exactly. It's a simple optical effect, but if you don't understand the underlying physics, it can be very confusing. This is why technical manuals are important, Hash realized. They explain the underlying principles behind the phenomena we observe. Now you're getting it, Arthur said with approval. As they approached the engineering bay, Arthur noticed that the blast doors were still sealed from the earlier emergency protocols. Hash, do you remember the override code for the engineering bay blast doors? Hash consulted a small device attached to his utility belt. Override code 77 Alpha 39. But Arthur, are you sure you're feeling well enough to return to work? You've had a very stressful day. Arthur laughed. Hash, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly fine. The only stress I experienced was from being strapped to a medical bed while everyone around me was convinced I was dying. Now that we've cleared up that misunderstanding, I feel great. They entered the engineering bay, and Arthur immediately noticed that the quantum flux regulator was still disassembled from his earlier repair attempt. The tool that had caused his minor injury was lying on the floor where it had fallen. "Well," Arthur said, picking up the tool, "I guess I should finish what I started." Hash looked alarmed. "Arthur, perhaps you should take a break from repair work for today. After what happened." "Hash, what happened was a misunderstanding about human physiology, not a problem with my engineering skills. The regulator still needs to be repaired, and I'm still the best person to do it." Arthur positioned himself under the regulator housing and resumed work on the problematic coupling. This time, he was more careful with his grip on the quantum spanner, and he completed the adjustment without incident. "Flux readings are optimal," Hash reported from the monitoring station. "The regulator is functioning within normal parameters." "Excellent," Arthur said, emerging from under the housing. "See no problems at all." As Arthur began putting away his tools, Hash approached him with a serious expression. "Arthur, I want to apologize again for my reaction earlier. I realize now that I should have asked questions before assuming you were in danger." "Hash, you don't need to keep apologizing. You did what you thought was right based on the information you had. The problem wasn't your reaction. The problem was that we didn't have the right information in the first place." "But if I had read the human physiology manual, then you would have known that human blood looks orange under Bordeaux lighting." "But Hash, there are probably thousands of details about human physiology that aren't covered in any manual. The important thing is that we learn from this experience and communicate better in the future." Hash nodded slowly. "You're right, but I'm still going to read every manual related to human physiology that I can find." "That's fine, but don't try to read them all at once. Start with the basics and work your way up to the more complex material." As they finished cleaning up the engineering bay, Captain Thrace's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All senior staff report to the main conference room for an emergency briefing regarding today's incident." Arthur and Hash exchanged glances. "I guess they want to conduct a formal review of what happened," Arthur said. "Are you concerned about potential disciplinary action?" Hash asked. "Not really. What happened today was a systems integration failure, not a personnel error. The ship's computers and medical protocols weren't properly configured for human crew members. That's a design oversight, not a mistake on anyone's part." They made their way to the main conference room, a large chamber located near the ship's central command center. The room was designed to accommodate representatives from all species in the crew, with seating and workstations configured for various physiological requirements. Captain Thrace was already present, along with Dr. Venth and several other senior staff members. Arthur recognized Commander Yala, the Zanari First Officer, and Chief Engineer Kardok, a massive Krillian, whose species was known for their exceptional technical skills. "Arthur, Hash," Captain Thrace called out as they entered. "Please take seats. We're conducting a formal review of today's incident to determine what procedural changes are needed to prevent similar situations in the future." Arthur and Hash found seats at the central conference table. Arthur noticed that several other crew members were participating in the meeting via holographic projection, including representatives from species that weren't physically present on the ship. "Before we begin," Captain Thrace announced, "I want to make it clear that this review is focused on improving our procedures, not on assigning blame. Today's incident highlighted significant gaps in our integration protocols for new species." Commander Yala activated a holographic display showing a timeline of the day's events. At 14:32 ship time, Arthur sustained a minor injury while performing routine maintenance on the quantum flux regulator. At 14:33, crew member Hash observed what he interpreted as signs of critical medical distress and activated emergency medical protocols. The display showed the cascade of events that followed the emergency medical response, Arthur's restraint and examination, the ship-wide alert, and finally, the resolution of the crisis, when the computer's medical criteria were updated with human physiological parameters. The total duration of the emergency was approximately 2 hours and 37 minutes. Commander Yala continued. During this time, normal ship operations were disrupted, medical resources were diverted, and one crew member was subjected to unnecessary medical procedures. Dr. Venth leaned forward in his chair. From a medical perspective, this incident revealed serious deficiencies in our understanding of human physiology. Our diagnostic equipment, treatment protocols, and emergency procedures are all calibrated for non-human species. What specific changes do you recommend? Captain Thrace asked. First, we need to recalibrate all medical sensors and diagnostic equipment to account for human physiological parameters. Second, we need to update our medical databases with comprehensive human medical information. Third, we need to train all medical personnel in basic human anatomy and physiology. Chief Engineer Kardok spoke up in his deep, rumbling voice. From an engineering perspective, we need to review all ship systems that interact with biological entities. Environmental controls, safety systems, emergency protocols. They all need to be verified for compatibility with human physiology. Arthur raised his hand. If I may make a suggestion? Of course, Arthur, Captain Thrace replied. I think the most important change we can make is to improve our communication and training protocols. Hash's reaction was completely understandable, given his knowledge base, but it could have been prevented with better preparation. What kind of preparation do you have in mind? Cross-species education for all crew members. Everyone should have at least basic knowledge of the physiological and cultural characteristics of all species represented in the crew. It doesn't have to be comprehensive, but it should cover the essential information needed to avoid misunderstandings. Hash nodded enthusiastically. I agree completely. If I had known that human blood appears orange under our lighting, I never would have interpreted it as a medical emergency. Commander Yala made notes on her datapad. We could implement a mandatory cross-species familiarization course for all crew members. The course could be updated whenever new species join the crew. That's an excellent idea, Captain Thrace agreed. Dr. Venth, could you coordinate with the other department heads to develop a comprehensive training curriculum? Absolutely. I'll begin work on it immediately. Captain Thrace looked around the table. Are there any other recommendations? Arthur hesitated for a moment, then decided to speak up. There is one more thing. I think we need to examine our emergency response protocols more carefully. In what way? Today's incident escalated very quickly from a minor injury to a ship-wide emergency. While rapid response is important in genuine emergencies, we need better procedures for verifying the nature of an emergency before activating full crisis protocols. Chief Engineer Kardok nodded approvingly. Arthur makes a good point. Our emergency systems are designed to err on the side of caution, but excessive caution can sometimes create more problems than it solves. What do you suggest? Captain Thrace asked. A tiered emergency response system, Arthur replied. Instead of going from normal operations directly to full emergency status, we could have intermediate levels that allow for assessment and verification before committing to full emergency protocols. Dr. Venth looked thoughtful. That would certainly help prevent situations like today's, where a minor medical issue triggered a major emergency response. I'll have the command staff review our emergency protocols, Captain Thrace decided. We'll look at implementing a more graduated response system. As the meeting continued, Arthur found himself impressed by the thoroughness and thoughtfulness of the review process. Rather than simply treating the incident as an embarrassing mistake, the senior staff was using it as an opportunity to improve their procedures and prevent future problems. Before we conclude, Captain Thrace said, I want to commend all parties involved for their professionalism during today's crisis. Hash, your quick response to what you perceived as a medical emergency was exactly what we would want from any crew member. Dr. Venth, your medical team's rapid response was exemplary. And Arthur, your patience and persistence in trying to explain the situation helped us reach a resolution. Arthur felt a warm sense of appreciation for the captain's words. Despite the stress and confusion of the day, Everyone had been trying to do their jobs to the best of their ability, based on the information they had. "Are there any final questions or comments?" Captain Thrace asked. Hash raised one of his 4 hands. "Captain, I have a request." "Yes, Hash. I would like to be the first crew member to complete the new cross-species familiarization course when it becomes available. I want to make sure that I'm properly prepared to work with Arthur and any other humans who join our crew in the future." Arthur smiled at his assistant's enthusiasm. "Hash, I think that's a great idea, and I'd like to reciprocate by learning more about Bordeaux physiology and culture. Maybe we can study together." "I would like that very much," Hash replied. Captain Thrace stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "This has been a productive discussion. Department heads, please begin implementing the changes we've discussed. And remember, today's incident, while stressful, has ultimately made us a better crew." As the meeting broke up, Arthur found himself feeling optimistic about the future. What had started as a frightening misunderstanding had turned into an opportunity for the entire crew to learn and improve. Dr. Venth approached Arthur as they left the conference room. "Arthur, I'd like to schedule a comprehensive medical examination for you when you have time." Arthur felt a moment of alarm. "Is there something wrong?" "Not at all," Dr. Venth assured him. "I want to establish proper baseline readings for human physiology using properly calibrated equipment. It will help us provide better medical care for you and any other humans who join our crew." "That makes sense. When would you like to schedule it?" "How about tomorrow morning? It shouldn't take more than an hour." "That works for me." As Arthur and Hash walked back toward the engineering section, Hash seemed unusually quiet. "Hash, is something bothering you?" Arthur asked. "I'm still processing everything that happened today," Hash replied. "I keep thinking about how quickly the situation escalated and how it could have been prevented with better information." "That's a natural reaction, Hash. What you're experiencing is probably similar to what humans call learning from experience. It's not always comfortable, but it's how we grow and improve." "Do humans often learn from uncomfortable experiences?" Arthur laughed. "Hash, humans have a saying, good judgment comes from experience and experience comes from bad judgment. Some of our most valuable learning comes from situations that don't go as planned." "That's an interesting perspective. In Bordeaux culture, we tend to view mistakes as failures to be avoided, rather than opportunities for learning." "Both approaches have merit," Arthur said thoughtfully. "The key is finding the right balance between preventing problems and learning from them when they occur." As they reached the engineering bay, Arthur realized that his shift was nearly over. The quantum flux regulator repair that should have taken 30 minutes had somehow consumed most of his day, though admittedly not in the way he had expected. "Hash, I'm going to head to my quarters for the evening. Tomorrow we can start working on the environmental control system upgrades." "Arthur, before you go, I have one more question." "Sure, what is it?" "How do I know if you're actually sick or injured? I mean, if your normal vital signs look like critical system failure to our sensors. How will I be able to tell if you're really having a medical emergency?" Arthur paused, considering the question seriously. "That's actually a very important point, Hash. You should learn to recognize the obvious signs of human distress. Things like unconsciousness, severe bleeding, difficulty breathing, or inability to communicate coherently. But when in doubt, you should always ask me directly if I need medical attention. And if you're unconscious, then you should definitely call for medical help. An unconscious human is probably experiencing a real emergency." Hash made notes on his data pad. "I'll add this information to my human physiology study materials." Arthur smiled. "Hash, I think you're going to become an expert on human biology before this mission is over." "I certainly intend to try." Arthur left the engineering bay and made his way through the ship's corridors toward the crew quarters section. As he walked, he reflected on the remarkable day he had experienced. In the span of a few hours, he had gone from performing routine maintenance to being declared critically ill, to being strapped to a medical bed, to being declared dead, to having his death investigated by the entire crew. The human crew quarters on the ISS Equilibrium were located in a section of the ship specifically designed to accommodate Earth-normal environmental conditions. The lighting, atmospheric composition, gravity, and even the color scheme had been carefully calibrated to make human crew members feel comfortable. Arthur's quarters were modest but comfortable, consisting of a bedroom, a small workspace, and a private bathroom. The walls were decorated with images of Earth landscapes, and the air had a subtle scent that reminded him of a forest after rain. As he settled into his desk chair, Arthur activated his personal computer and began composing a message to his family back on Earth. The communication delay between the ship and Earth was currently about 6 hours, so real-time conversation was impossible, but recorded messages could be transmitted during the ship's scheduled communication windows. "Hi, everyone," Arthur began speaking to the computer's recording system. "I've just finished my first day aboard the ISS Equilibrium, and it was certainly more eventful than I expected." He paused, considering how much detail to include about the day's medical emergency. His family would probably be worried if they knew he had been strapped to a medical bed while doctors prepared to perform emergency surgery on him. "I had a minor tool accident today that led to some confusion about human physiology among the medical staff," he continued. "It turns out that human blood looks orange under Bordeaux lighting systems, which caused quite a stir. Everything worked out fine, but it highlighted the importance of cross-species education on mixed crews." Arthur spent the next 20 minutes recording a detailed message about his experiences, the ship's impressive technology, and his initial impressions of working with a multi-species crew. He made sure to emphasize the positive aspects of the experience while downplaying the more frightening elements of the medical emergency. After finishing his message home, Arthur decided to review some of the technical documentation related to human integration aboard the ship. If today's events had taught him anything, it was the importance of understanding the systems and protocols that governed life aboard the ISS Equilibrium. The ship's database contained thousands of technical manuals, procedural guidelines, and reference documents. Arthur began with the Human Crew Integration Handbook, a comprehensive guide that covered everything from environmental controls to emergency procedures to cultural considerations. As he read, Arthur began to understand the magnitude of the challenge that the ship's designers had faced in creating a vessel capable of supporting 17 different species simultaneously. Every system had to be flexible enough to accommodate radically different physiological requirements while maintaining the safety and comfort of all crew members. The medical section of the handbook was particularly enlightening. Arthur learned that human medical protocols had been added to the ship's systems just 3 months before his arrival, based on data provided by Earth's medical authorities. However, the integration had been incomplete, with many subsystems still calibrated for the original species complement. Note: Arthur read from the handbook. Human physiological parameters may appear abnormal when measured by sensors calibrated for other species. Medical personnel should consult human-specific diagnostic criteria before interpreting vital signs or health indicators. Arthur shook his head in amazement. The information that could have prevented the entire day's crisis was right there in the handbook, but apparently, no one had read that particular section carefully enough to remember it during the emergency. He continued reading, making notes about important procedures and potential areas of confusion. The more he learned about the ship's complex systems, the more he appreciated the incredible achievement that the ISS Equilibrium represented. As he worked, Arthur heard his door chime softly. "Come in," he called. The door slid open to reveal Hash, carrying a large data pad and looking somewhat nervous. "Arthur, I hope I'm not disturbing you," Hash said. "Not at all, Hash. What brings you by—" "I wanted to give you this," Hash said, holding out the data pad. "I've downloaded every technical manual, reference guide, and procedural document related to human physiology and ship integration. I thought you might want to review them as well." Arthur accepted the data pad and scrolled through the extensive list of documents. "Hash, this is incredibly thoughtful of you. Thank you. I also wanted to apologize one more time for today's incident. I know you said it wasn't necessary, but I feel responsible for the disruption it caused. Arthur gestured for Hash to take a seat in the small chair across from his desk. Hash, I appreciate your concern, but I want you to understand something important. What happened today wasn't your fault, and it wasn't a failure on anyone's part. But if I had been better prepared, then you might have handled the situation differently, Arthur agreed. But Hash, the same could be said for everyone involved. The medical staff could have been better prepared, the ship's computers could have been better programmed, and I could have been more careful with my tools. We all did the best we could with the information we had. Hash considered this perspective. So you don't think the incident could have been prevented? It probably could have been prevented in any number of ways, Arthur replied. But the important thing is that we learned from it, and we're taking steps to prevent similar situations in the future. That's how progress works. We encounter problems, we learn from them, and we improve our procedures. Is that a common human philosophy? Arthur smiled. I think it's a common philosophy among most intelligent species, Hash. The ability to learn from experience and adapt to new situations is one of the hallmarks of intelligence. Hash seemed to relax slightly. I suppose you're right. In Bordeaux culture, we place great emphasis on avoiding mistakes, but perhaps we don't focus enough on learning from them when they do occur. Both approaches have value, Arthur said. The key is finding the right balance. You want to prevent problems when possible, but you also want to be able to adapt and improve when unexpected situations arise. They spent the next hour discussing the various technical documents that Hash had compiled with Arthur, explaining some of the more complex aspects of human physiology, and Hash sharing insights about Bordeaux medical practices and engineering principles. Arthur, Hash said as he prepared to leave, I have one final question. What's that? The phrase you used earlier, always read the manual. Is that a common human expression? Arthur laughed. It's extremely common, Hash. In fact, it's probably one of the most important pieces of advice that humans give to each other. The idea is that most problems can be avoided or solved by consulting the appropriate documentation before taking action. It seems like very practical advice. It is. Of course, the challenge is that modern technology often comes with manuals that are hundreds or thousands of pages long. The trick is knowing which parts of the manual are most relevant to your specific situation. Hash nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand. You don't need to memorize every detail, but you need to know enough to find the right information when you need it. Exactly. And you need to develop the habit of checking the manual before assuming you know how something works. I will definitely remember that lesson, Hash said as he stood to leave. Thank you for being so patient with me today, Arthur. I look forward to working with you on future projects. The feeling is mutual, Hash. I think we're going to make a great team. After Hash left, Arthur returned to his reading, but his mind kept wandering back to the events of the day. In many ways, his first day aboard the ISS Equilibrium had been a perfect microcosm of the challenges and opportunities that came with interspecies cooperation. The misunderstanding about his blood had been frightening and potentially dangerous, but it had also led to important improvements in the ship's procedures and a deeper understanding among the crew members. Arthur realized that this was probably what the next 3 years would be like. A constant process of learning, adapting, and improving as different species worked together toward common goals. As he prepared for bed, Arthur felt a sense of satisfaction about the day's events. Yes, it had been stressful and confusing, but it had also been educational and ultimately positive. He had learned valuable lessons about the importance of communication preparation and cultural understanding. More importantly, he had gained a deeper appreciation for his role as the first human crew member aboard an interstellar vessel. He wasn't just an engineer maintaining equipment. He was a representative of his entire species, helping to pave the way for future human participation in galactic civilization. Arthur's final thought before falling asleep was a recognition of how fortunate he was to be part of such an extraordinary endeavor. Despite the day's challenges, he was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do. The next morning, Arthur woke to the gentle chiming of his alarm and the gradual brightening of his quarters' lighting system. The artificial dawn was timed to match his circadian rhythms, helping to maintain his biological clock despite the absence of natural sunlight. As he prepared for his second day aboard the ISS Equilibrium, Arthur reflected on how different his perspective was from just 24 hours earlier. Yesterday, he had been nervous about fitting in with an alien crew and proving himself competent in an unfamiliar environment. Today, he felt like a full member of the team with a deeper understanding of both the challenges and rewards of interspecies cooperation. Arthur made his way to the ship's central dining facility, a large space designed to accommodate the dietary needs and social customs of all crew species. The facility operated continuously, serving meals appropriate for different biological requirements and work schedules. As he entered the dining area, Arthur noticed that several crew members turned to look at him with expressions of curiosity and concern. Word of yesterday's medical emergency had clearly spread throughout the ship, and many crew members were probably wondering about his current health status. Arthur collected his breakfast from the human-compatible food service area and found a seat at one of the central tables. Almost immediately, he was joined by Hash, who appeared to be carrying enough food for several people. "Good morning, Arthur," Hash said cheerfully. "How are you feeling today?" "I feel great, Hash. How about you?" "Very well, thank you. I spent most of last evening reading human physiology manuals, and I learned many fascinating things about your species." Arthur smiled as he began eating his breakfast. Such as, "Did you know that humans can survive for weeks without food, but only days without water? In physiology, the ratio is exactly reversed." "I did know that, actually. Human metabolism is quite different from most other species." As they ate, other crew members began approaching their table, apparently curious about Arthur's condition and eager to learn more about human physiology. Arthur found himself answering questions about everything from human dietary requirements to sleep patterns to emotional responses. "Is it true that humans only have 2 arms?" asked Elinda, a Zanari scientist. "That's correct," Arthur replied. "Most human tasks are designed for 2-handed operation." "How do you manage complex technical work with such limited manipulator capability?" asked Grex, a Krillian engineer. "We use tools to extend our capabilities," Arthur explained. "Human technology is designed around the principle of tool use, rather than multiple limbs." Dr. Venth approached the table, carrying a medical scanner. "Arthur, if you don't mind, I'd like to take some quick readings for comparison with yesterday's data." "Of course, Doctor." Dr. Venth activated his scanner and took readings of Arthur's vital signs. This time, the device had been properly calibrated for human physiology, and the readings appeared normal on the display. "Perfect," Dr. Venth announced. "All readings are within optimal human parameters." A small cheer went up from the nearby tables, and Arthur realized that many crew members had been genuinely concerned about his health. The level of care and attention was both touching and slightly overwhelming. "Thank you all for your concern," Arthur said, addressing the group. "I'm perfectly healthy and I'm looking forward to getting back to work today." As breakfast continued, Arthur found himself at the center of an impromptu educational session about human biology and culture. Crew members asked questions about human history, technology, social customs, and future plans for space exploration. "Will more humans be joining interstellar crews in the future?" asked Commander Yala. "I certainly hope so," Arthur replied. "Humanity has a lot to offer galactic civilization, and we have a lot to learn from other species. I think the future will see much more human participation in interstellar activities." "What do humans hope to gain from joining the galactic community?" asked Captain Thrace, who had quietly joined the group. Arthur considered the question carefully. "I think humans are driven by curiosity and a desire to explore and understand the universe. We want to learn about other forms of life, other ways of thinking, and other approaches to solving problems. We also want to contribute our own unique perspectives and capabilities. And what do you think humans can contribute? Well, humans are good at adapting to new situations and finding creative solutions to problems. We're also good at working together with diverse groups, which seems to be an important skill for interstellar cooperation. Hash nodded enthusiastically. Arthur demonstrated excellent adaptability yesterday. Even when faced with a very stressful situation, he remained calm and focused on finding a solution. Arthur felt a warm sense of appreciation for Hash's supportive comment. Thank you, Hash. But I think yesterday showed that all of us, humans, Bordo Zanari, everyone, are capable of adapting and learning when we work together. As the conversation continued, Arthur began to understand that yesterday's medical emergency had actually served an important purpose beyond the immediate lessons about reading manuals and cross-species education. It had given the crew an opportunity to see how humans responded to crisis situations, and it had demonstrated that humans could be valuable team members, even when things didn't go according to plan. Arthur, Captain Thrace said as the breakfast gathering began to break up, I want you to know that yesterday's incident has actually increased my confidence in having humans as part of our crew. How so, Captain? You handled a very difficult situation with grace and patience. You could have become angry or frustrated, but instead you focused on solving the problem and helping others understand the situation. Those are exactly the qualities we need for successful interstellar cooperation. Arthur felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Thank you, Captain. That means a lot to me. As Arthur and Hash made their way back to the engineering section, Arthur reflected on how much had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, he had been the new human crew member trying to prove himself. Today, he felt like a respected member of the team with valuable contributions to make. Arthur, Hash said as they walked, I have a confession to make. What's that? When I first learned that a human would be joining our engineering team, I was skeptical about whether your species would be able to handle the technical complexity of our systems. Arthur smiled. And now I realize that technical competence isn't just about having the right number of arms or the right kind of biology. It's about problem-solving ability, adaptability, and the willingness to learn from experience. Those are very wise observations, Hash. I learned them from watching you yesterday. Even when everyone around you was convinced you were dying, you never stopped trying to explain the situation and find a solution. That taught me something important about the value of persistence and clear thinking. As they entered the engineering bay, Arthur noticed that someone had posted a small sign near the tool storage area. The sign read, Remember, always read the manual, especially for new species. Arthur burst out laughing. Hash, did you put that sign up? Hash looked slightly embarrassed. I thought it would be a good reminder for everyone. I think it's perfect. They spent the morning working on routine maintenance tasks with Hash, asking occasional questions about human physiology, and Arthur sharing insights about human engineering approaches. The work proceeded smoothly, with none of the dramatic complications of the previous day. Around midday, Arthur received a communication from Dr. Venth, requesting that he report to the medical bay for his comprehensive examination. Arthur made his way to the medical facility curious to see how the experience would differ, now that the medical equipment had been properly calibrated for human physiology. The examination went smoothly with Dr. Venth, taking detailed readings of all of Arthur's vital signs and biological functions. The properly calibrated equipment showed that Arthur was in excellent health, with all parameters well within normal human ranges. Fascinating, Dr. Venth commented as he reviewed the data. Human physiology is quite different from what I expected based on my experience with other species. In what ways? Your cardiovascular system is remarkably efficient. Your neural activity patterns are very complex, and your metabolic processes are quite adaptable. I can see why humans have been successful in so many different environments. We're a fairly adaptable species, Arthur agreed. It's probably one of our most useful characteristics for space exploration. Dr. Venth completed his examination and updated Arthur's medical records with the new baseline data. "Arthur, I want to thank you again for your patience yesterday. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the importance of understanding species-specific physiology." "I'm glad something positive came out of it, Doctor." As Arthur returned to the engineering section, he reflected on the remarkable efficiency with which the ship's crew had learned from yesterday's experience. New procedures had been implemented, equipment had been recalibrated, and educational programs had been initiated. It was an impressive demonstration of the benefits of systematic problem-solving and continuous improvement. The rest of Arthur's second day aboard the ISS Equilibrium passed without incident. He completed several routine maintenance tasks, assisted Hash with equipment calibrations, and participated in a cross-species engineering meeting where different approaches to quantum system design were discussed. That evening, Arthur received a response to the message he had sent to his family the previous day. His parents and siblings were excited to hear about his experiences and relieved to learn that his minor medical confusion had been resolved successfully. "We're so proud of you, Arthur," his mother's recorded voice said. "You're representing humanity in the most important endeavor our species has ever undertaken. We know you'll do wonderful things out there." Arthur composed a new message describing his second day and the positive changes that had resulted from the previous day's challenges. He emphasized the remarkable cooperation and problem-solving abilities of his multi-species crewmates and his growing confidence in the mission's potential for success. As he prepared for his second night aboard the ship, Arthur realized that he had found his place in this extraordinary community of beings from across the galaxy. The challenges were real and would continue to arise, but so were the opportunities for learning, growth, and contribution to something larger than any individual or species. Arthur's final thought before sleep was a recognition that his role aboard the ISS Equilibrium was about more than just maintaining equipment or proving human competence. He was helping to build the foundation for a future in which different species could work together successfully, learning from each other's strengths and supporting each other through challenges. The phrase "always read the manual" had become more than just a reminder about technical documentation. It had become a symbol of the importance of preparation, understanding, and communication in building successful relationships across the vast diversity of intelligent life in the galaxy. Arthur smiled as he drifted off to sleep, looking forward to whatever challenges and discoveries his third day aboard the ISS Equilibrium might bring. He was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do, and he couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would teach him about the universe and his place in it.